In this video, we're checking out a cool car collection and a functional shop that's sitting on the side of the road. There's some cool stuff in here, some old school hot rods, some really crazy looking builds too. Let's go check it out. So every year I travel with the Great Race, which is a vintage car rally that goes long distances. And one of our days, we went actually into Kansas and Oklahoma, and on our way back, we just had to lock up the brakes because there was a four-wheel drive Pinto sitting on the side of the road and a whole row of 40s Dodge pickups and all sorts of cool stuff sitting there just right off the side of historic Route 66. And we swing in there, and there is a whole group of guys and girls chopping the top on a 33 Plymouth sedan. And I thought that was just the coolest thing, that we're driving around minding our own business on I guess that was a Saturday afternoon, and we swing into this shop, and I mean, they are actively cutting, welding, hammering, grinding. So it took a few minutes to kind of soak all this in and understand where we are and what we're looking at. And the bottom line is we were at Riley Restorations in Phelps, Missouri. Now this is Dave Riley. He's a hot rod guy. He's a Mopar guy. He happened to be co-hosting a chop class with Alan Banuelos, who is from Texas. He and his wife drove up from Texas, and this guy has a lot of experience building hot rods and custom cars. In fact, he actually worked for Gene Winfield. So this guy's been around, he's done a lot of cool stuff. And the fact that he and Dave and all these guys got together and chopped this car in a very short amount of time is just a cool little project. I really admire them for doing this type of thing, teaching people how to cut and chop and do all this custom work, because it is a dying art. It's a lost art that needs to be preserved. But on the outside of the shop, there was a lot of stuff to see. So I just made a walk through while they were in there beating and banging on the old Plymouth. I walked through and took a look at some of the stuff surrounding the shop, and I wanted to show it to you guys here. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is this little Model T, and it kind of looks like a desert runner, like something you could take off of a jump. And this thing was actually built by Ian Roussel, the Full Custom Garage, the TV show. You may have seen this build on his show, and you can see that this thing started life as maybe a Ford Bronco or a F-150. If you've seen the show, you probably know how he built it, but just my observations, looks like Ford underneath, and they've put this 27T body on there. It's fiberglass body, and he built a roll cage. It's just a really neat looking setup. It's got a Ford engine in there. You can see the old Finn aluminum valve covers that they've painted. The car's got a pretty cool blend of hot rod styling and off-road styling. It's not something I ever would have even dreamed of, those two worlds colliding, but it's a pretty cool build. The next vehicle in the lineup, which is all visible from Route 66, is a 40s Dodge pickup truck, and you can see that it has a big tank on the back of it. And even though this thing looks rusty, you can see that it doesn't have much paint on it at all. It's actually a very solid truck, very buildable truck, but at this point it's essentially yard art. I don't know any history behind it or what it might have done for its job back in the day, but it's a pretty cool piece. Next up is a 1960 Chevrolet Bel Air, and this is a four-door sedan. Nothing real special, nothing real crazy about this car. You can see that it's beat up. It's probably got some rust underneath. No telling what it has for an engine. More than likely a six-cylinder, but who knows, it may have had a 283 or even a 348 during this time frame, but I didn't look under the hood to even check. The next car is a 40s DeSoto Coupe. I don't know a whole lot of details on this car, but I can tell that somebody has worked it over. They've set it down a little bit lower. You can see it's got some aftermarket wheels on there. It's got sort of a primary paint job situation going on. It's a cool car that looks like you could hop in and have a good time with. Now, I'm not totally up to speed on Dodge and Plymouth cars from the 30s and 40s. I can't pick them out of a crowd, but just based on some quick research, this looks like about a 36 Plymouth Coupe. Now, this is obviously a rough project that they have just blasted some paint on to just preserve the metal, but there's something here. There's a starting point. You could build a gasser out of this thing. You could build a traditional hot rod out of it. You could build an old school custom out of it, chop the top, put some fenders on it, set it low. There's so many options. This is like a blank canvas. Speaking of chop tops, here's another chop top car, this time a 1940 Chevrolet Coupe. But this thing has a pretty heavy cut on the chop top. And you can see they've had to do some pretty serious metal work to make it all work, but it's got a nice profile to it. You can see it is not a complete car by any means, but if it were sitting low with those white wall tires, this thing would be extremely cool. Next up is another 40s Dodge pickup truck. This one appears to be a half-ton truck, and it looks like it could be a pretty cool project someday. Here's another one of these 40s Dodge pickup trucks. This one appears to have had some suspension work, probably has a later model engine underneath the hood. You can see around back here, it's got a keg for a gas tank, and that is a pretty good sign that a hot rodder's been fooling with it. So you can go ahead and assume that it has a hot rod V8 under the hood, some cool suspension underneath, probably some better brakes. And even though it looks like an old ratty pickup truck, I would bet that this thing hits the road really nice. All right, now here's the car that made me pull off the road to see this collection. This is a Ford Pinto, or it could be a Mercury Bobcat. I don't actually know that. But either way, this old Pinto body is sitting up on what I assume is like a Dodge truck frame. And the only reason I assume Dodge is because I can see the engine, and it appears to be a small block Dodge engine. So probably an 80s Dodge truck, if I had to guess. Maybe a Ram Charger chassis, don't know. Whatever the case is, they created a really cool looking car. And this is another one of those Ian Roussel builds from Full Custom Garage. And somehow or another, this thing ended up in Dave Riley's possession, and it's a fixture at his shop here in Missouri. Now, I mentioned Dave was a Mopar guy, and we're about to get into some of that stuff here. So we've seen the 40s Dodge pickup trucks and some of the Dodge elements sprinkled around throughout this collection. But this is the serious stuff here. This is a 69 Plymouth Barracuda. Now, early Barracudas don't get quite as much love as the E-body cars, the 70 to 74 cars. And this one appears to be a very buildable car. Judging by the stance, it doesn't have an engine in it. It really looks like it has a lot of potential. Now, this next Mopar looks to be about a 69 Plymouth Satellite or Roadrunner. This car is definitely rough. You can see that it's got some major rust issues. Quarter panels are rotted out, which usually, if that part of the car is rotted out, that means the floors, the trunk pan, the inner wheel houses, all of that stuff's probably got to be replaced. But you got a starting point right here. So the thing that got my attention about this car is the fact that it's been orange at some point in its life, and back here on the deck lid, on the trunk, it says Dancing Days. 70s street machines, 80s street machines, you know, they had some questionable details. That, you know, they had the back end jacked up, big tires on the back, sticking out of the wheel wells. But a lot of that stuff is kind of coming back around, coming full circle. So seeing a car like this that obviously has been sitting for a long time, it's obviously been off the road for decades, but it might have a new life here with Riley's Restorations. The next car we're going to look at is a 1954 Ford Crestline Skyliner. Now, the unique part about these cars is the roof, because half of the roof, the front half of it, is made out of plexiglass. So it's a tinted plexiglass that you can see through, and it obviously lights up the entire inside of this car with just natural sunlight. And it really gives a wild perspective from inside the car and from outside, because you could see that green tint. It's obviously been sitting for years, but he's going to bring it in and get it straightened up, get the body back in good enough shape to put this car back on the road. They only made about 13,000 of these Skyliners in 1954, and not many of them survived. So it's really neat to see this one, even though it's rough. It's neat to see this one getting a little bit of attention. So we eased on back into the back lot, and a lot of stuff back here, a lot of parts and pieces and parts vehicles. including some old Dodge trucks from the 70s, probably some for the 80s. And then we saw, looks like maybe a late 70s Dodge Aspen or something of that variety. You can see that sort of funky roof line and quarter window. That sort of looks like about a 78 Dodge Aspen if I had to put a guess on it. And then covered up back here is another one of these 70s Mopars. I didn't uncover it. We'll just leave that to our imagination. And then going on back to the back part of the property, there is a homemade dune buggy that's really cool, or maybe a better term for it is an oversized go-kart, because it has a Briggs & Stratton engine on it. And I'd say this thing probably doesn't go real fast, but it was a lot of fun for whoever built it back in the day. And then we got all sorts of other parts and pieces and projects all scattered around here. So a big pile of tires and wheels, including this really cool tire right here, this white letter tire. I love stuff like that. Even when it's rotten and not usable, it's always cool to look at. And then we got one of the few General Motors products here on the property. This is a late 70s Monte Carlo, and you can see this was somebody's hot rod back in the day. They had a set of what appeared to be like the knockoff chrome Krager SST wheels on there. Wasn't quite the Super Tricks, wasn't quite a centerline, it was like a chrome version. Either way, they looked cool at the time, and you can see this car is kind of stuck in that time period. And I don't know what it has for horsepower. I don't know any details about its history, but I thought it was cool that it had this tire and wheel combination on it. And then we've got a Dodge Dart back here. We can see that this thing has some stickers on the windows. You can see it has a little bit of hot rod elements throughout. I don't know what it has for an engine, but these cars are pretty fast no matter what, because they're lightweight, they hook up well, and you can go have a lot of fun without spending very much money. So we didn't spend all day at the shop. This was just a passing through type of situation, but there was so much cool stuff to see here, and it was such a neat experience that he just welcomed us in there. We got to go hang out with him for a little bit, see what they were doing, watch them chop the top on an old Plymouth sedan. You know, it was just a neat experience, and I wanted to share that here and just spread the word about these old car collections that are everywhere. They're all over this country. Everywhere you go, you meet cool guys that have cool cars, and most of the time, they got more than one. And in this case, he had a yard full of them. So I wanted to show it to you guys here. Thank you for watching.